Some men make history as they time on earth transform the social, identity, cultural and artistic landscape of their time. And if some men embody that transformation at time when the socio-economic and racial division left the painful scarf of an omnipresent past open, the artist we're going to share the story of is one of the cornerstones of that change. His velvet voice carried out powerful messages through his song, which are evocative of a need to bring to light a culture in quest of reaffirmation and equality. He used his charisma, his aura, his talent and his influence for the civil rights movement, and his messages still resonate nowadays in a bitter reality. He left his mark on the 20th century, and his impactful word will continue to resonate through his songs that are now classic of modern music. From Harlem to Jamaica, on stage in the theater or under the spotlight in the cinema, he has made history. His name is Harry Belafonte. Hi everyone, I'm back today with the name of an artist that I've already mentioned on the channel, and I did plan on sharing his story with you in the future, but knowing the exceptional circumstances, it was really important for me to share his story with you because he's been an absolute pioneer and he's opened so many doors for so many artists in the entertainment industry in the 20th century. So this artist is someone that I've discovered when I was very young because it's one of my mom's favorite artists, and his story is really unique, and I've got a really strong admiration for that man because the messages that he's been conveying through art throughout his career are still extremely relevant nowadays. He's someone exceptional. He's left us today, but he marked history. His name is Harry Belafonte. Harold George Belafonte Jr. was born on the 1st of March 1927 in Harlem, New York City. And I really want you to keep in mind that he was born in Harlem because it's really going to have an impact on the young boy that he was at the time. So he was born on the black neighborhood of Harlem in New York City, and the question of race is something that's going to be overwhelming him from the very young age, because on his dad's side he was both Black American but also Jewish and Dutch, and on his mom's side his grandmother, who looked after him from the very young age, and we're going to see that in a second. But whenever he was talking about his grandmother, there was always lots of love and care. So his grandmother was Jamaican and Scottish, and his granddad was Afro-Jamaican. So until 5 years old, he's going to be in New York City with his parents, and he's going to be surrounded by the black community, by the socio-economical situation of the time. So for socio-economical reason, his mom will leave him and his brother to his grandmother in Jamaica.
But the experience in the first instance was that my mother took us and she left.
So from 1932 to 1940, he's going to be in Jamaica. And what's going to happen is that he's going to be surrounded by music, but not only. He's also going to be surrounded by the socio-economical situation. And he's going to observe how difficult life is for people in Jamaica. And it is something that's going to have a tremendous impact on his music and the messages that he wants to convey. And the approach that he's going to give to his music will be shaped by the rhythm from the Caribbean. But at the time, he was still this young boy in Jamaica, and there is something really important that I'd like to mention. It is that for him, he never really felt himself wherever he was located. Whenever he was in America, he felt more Jamaican, but whenever he was in Jamaica, he was always referred to him being American. And throughout his life, he's going to be seeking this reconnection with his identity, and it is also something that's going to influence his approach of music. So in 1940, he's going to go back to America, and to give you an example of how this question of race will be referred to him all the time. He was living in this Italian neighborhood, and what's going to happen is that one of his neighbors will ask him, where he is from, and he's going to say, well, I'm American. And what the neighbor will ask him is, why your hair are the way they are. And because he didn't want to justify himself, he's just gonna say, there was a fire in a previous place where I was living and my hair went on fire. That's the reason. But this is just an example to show you how much this question of identity, race, was something he was always referred to in his life at the time. And usually, when a human being is looking for this inner reconnection, they seek for it through the vocation of life, and that's exactly what he's going to be doing. So while being back in New York City, he's going to join the army and the navy, and he's going to serve during the Second World War. And in his mind, he's going to make a simple equation. He's going to assume that because Black American who's been serving during the Second World War and basically have put their lives at risk, the situation for the Black community in America would improve. But it's absolutely not what's going to happen.
Back home to find out that nothing changed. Black people were still being lynched, we were still being denied, we were still being cruelly relegated to second-class experiences.
And still in the 40s, an event of the everyday life will absolutely transform Harry's life. What you need to keep in mind is that at this time, Harry was still seeking for that identity, that sense of belonging, and those role models. And what's going to happen? He was an assistant concierge in a building, and one of the tenants will give him 2 tickets to attend one of the shows at the American Negro Theatre, and it's going to absolutely transform his life. So not only did he fall in love with this form of art, but it was also a way for him to express his inner self. So even if at the time he was financially struggling, whenever there was a performance, he would try to trade seats in between acts. So it's really something that gradually going to push him towards what became his actual passion. So at the end of the 40s, he's going to let this passion grow more and more, and he's going to attend a dramatic workshop at the New School in New York City with the very prestigious director Irving Piscator. And when I'm going to tell you the different students that were present during that workshop, you're going to see how exceptional this moment is to think about. The other students with him were Marlon Brando, Tony Curtis, Walter Matthau, B. Arthur, and Sidney Poitier. So just the thought of just having these great actors just gathered and enjoying this moment together, I think this is exceptional. And gradually, he's going to start to have a name in the musical industry, and he's actually the very first African American to receive a Tony Award in 1954 for his performance in John Morris Anderson Almanac. And you might be wondering when music will also step in his life. Well, it was actually at the same time, because for him it was any sort of form of art that would allow him to express himself. And he actually started to have a name in the music and in the jazz world with a specific bar where he was performing. And this bar is now a very prestigious one. It is the Village Vanguard Bar.
And it was in this place that the approval of this audience and those who came after charted my course and gave me validation.
One of his very first representation there was, again, something really surreal to imagine, but it was both with Charlie Parker and Miles Davis. And progressively, he's going to start to have more interest in folk music, and he's going to start working. And again, he's going to start working with a very prestigious person on this folk music. It was with Millard Thomas, and progressively, again, he's going to start to create his name in the industry. But you know, sometimes in life, you meet people, and those people are going to bring not just answers, but guidance, where before it was just full of pain, question, wonders, and scars. And it is exactly what's going to happen for Harry. because even if he found his passion around art, he was still seeking for this identity, sense of belonging, and he's going to meet a man who will help him and guide him to make the most of its arts and give meaning to it, not only just expressing what is inside, but also giving meaning to any form of art to bring awareness and share very strong messages. And that man is Paul Robeson. So before we go into any further details about this encounter between Harry and Paul, what you need to remember is that Harry was born in 1927 in Harlem, but he went back to Jamaica. But what happened at Harlem at this time was a very particular movement, and it is called Harlem Renaissance. And this movement was very much of an intellectual and cultural revival of the African American music, dance, art, theatre, politics, fashion, literature. It really managed to spot the light on all the greatness of the African American culture. But because Harry was in Jamaica at this time, he wasn't surrounded by this movement. But when he met Paul Robeson, it really opened his eyes around all this greatness. So to give you the context in this encounter between Paul and Harry, what happened is that at the time, Harry was still a student in the American Negro Theatre, and they've done an interpretation of the play of an Irish author, and this play was originally about the rebellion of the Irish against the British, and they've made an interpretation of that play using the American community. And Paul Robeson was present in the audience, and at the end he went to the students and he congratulated them. But not only did he congratulate them, he also told them something that really had a huge impact on Harry, knowing that he was really seeking for this purpose that he wanted to give to art. He actually told them this is exactly what the Black community need, and it had a huge impact on Harry. So the words that Paul will have will really resonate for Harry, because he was saying how much in his mind he was always having very negative representation of the Black community, whether it was in the theatre or on TV or in movies.
When I was a boy growing up, and for that matter almost all of America, was consistently and persistently being fed a diet of image that was wholly unacceptable to us. In the movies, we were servants, we were second-class citizens, we were buffoons, we were the brunt of and the object of everyone's disdain and benevolence. We seemed to have always been portrayed as a people without intellect, without purpose, without history, without dignity.
And in his mind, it was thinking for the very first time that he could reverse the situation.
The first positive sounds I ever heard about Africa came from Paul Robeson.
And actually spot the light on the greatness of Black people. And one of the conversations that Harry will have with Paul about this approach of art is something that really shaped Harry's approach for the future. Because Paul told Harry that if you had the opportunity to change the canvas, you could do it. But think about the way you're going to do it, because you've got two approaches.
Because usually when that opportunity is afforded you to make that change, it's a double-edged sword. It's either an opportunity that can use to be self-serving, to just do what is minimally necessary to get on with life, but sustaining some kind of relationship to the dominant community or to those whom you were serving that would never wrinkle them, would never cause them any discomfort.
But sometimes it is the way to go forward to make things change, and it is something that Harry will take on board with him.
Along comes Paul Robeson, along comes Joe Louis, along comes Duke Ellington, a handful of people in that time who rose above that image, who had purpose, who had intellect, who had dignity, who had talent. and decided to put it on the line.
So Paul's word, but not only his, but also all the work from W.E.B. Du Bois, one of the co-founder of the NNACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, will really resonate and guide Harry throughout his career and all the choices that he's going to make in his art. So really for Harry, there was this idea of really using Black people's lives, Black people past, to really translate messages in art. And he really mentions how much for Black people, art is not just about expressing themselves, it's also about expressing the suffering that in a society where you're not always openly listened, you really need to find a way to express how much your environment is suffocating. So sometimes it meant to have songs with double meanings, really managed to read in between the lines. A song in Brazil called Oro Mi Maio. It's a song which is both in Yoruba and also in Portuguese, and that song is having that double meaning and explaining how much you need to rely on God when things are getting really difficult in your life.
What Paul did very consciously was to go into that world of Black life, Black art, extract from it those songs that he felt most comfortable with, and he felt were the ones that most demonstrated our history, our struggle, and our dignity as a people. Certainly embodied in the world of spiritual music, of religious music, was an awful lot of that. For the simple reason that since it was in fact the only music that we were permitted to develop, that the white world, that our slave masters would permit us to perform, we had to use it to house all of our aspirations and all of our thoughts, because it was the only vehicle. So that when you look at spirituals, you look at religious music from the Black community, it is not just about the praise of God and the presence of Jesus. It is also about how we were pained, how we were crucified, how painful life had been to us, how we struggled, what our hopes and aspirations were all contained within the spiritual.
And for this approach itself, Harry was mentioning how much there was two options. You could have this Eurocentric approach that would make you do very well, whatever art it was for, but you could also have this approach using what at the time society wanted to remain blind to, but touching your inner self and going very much into what your real culture is about, to the greatness around it. So translating that in an easier way, he really meant how much if you were actually looking for all the greatness of the Black culture, you could do something absolutely exceptional, but you would actually connect to yourself, so it would give much more authenticity to the art. In 1956, he's going to release an album that will make him the very first artist to reach more than 1 million albums sold in the world, and that album is called Calypso. So when he's going to release this album, you will not expect that success, because first of all, that was not his first album, that was his third album, and it was an album that was really impregnated by the culture from the Caribbean. And you have to know that Calypso is a music genre that emerged in Trinidad and Tobago at the end of the 19th century in the Black community during the carnivals. And obviously, it's something that he's going to be listening to a lot when he's going to be in the Caribbean. And with this album, he's going to become an absolute star. And this album, including tubes like Deo, the Banana Boat song, or Jamaica Farewell. And if you listen to this song without really paying much attention, you might be thinking that these are like very light songs. But as I was explaining earlier, the purpose of Harry was really to communicate about Black people's life, Black people's struggle in a way that they would understand and they could refer to. And the song Deo is all about this. It's all about the painful situation, especially at work, for people in Jamaica. So this album will really open doors for Harry. And when I'm telling you that he was a pioneer, it is also because one of the doors that this album will open is the world of cinema. And what's going to happen is that, if you remember, Harry's mission was really to spot the light on Black people's greatness. And something that he mentioned is that for him, whenever he was watching something at the cinema, the roles that they were giving to Black people was always something really degrading and that was not putting any sort of dignity. And when he's been approached for a role in the cinema, he'd made very clear that he would only accept role that will not entertain that type of stereotype, and that's exactly what's going to happen. But one of the very first roles that he will accept will be with a white actress, and one of the scenes was between the two actors. There was a very strong connection and chemistry, and it is something that at the time the producer decided to cut off. And it's really going to remind Harry how much things would take lots of time to change, and lots of the initiative that he's going to take going forward will be for that change. In 1959, he will become the star of a national TV show called Tonight with Belafonte. And thanks to this show, he's going to become someone really influential in America for the mainstream public. And having an influential Black man on national TV will attract the attention of a man who was really seeking for help for the Black community and for the civil rights movement in America. You would have guessed it is Martin Luther King. And the very first time that Harry will talk to Martin Luther King is because Martin Luther King will give him a ring, and he's going to tell him that he needs his help. They're going to stay on the phone for 4 hours, and that was the very beginning of a very strong friendship.
And I couldn't quite believe it. I said, yes. He said, you don't know me, but, and he started to tell me, I said, Dr. King, I know who you are. I think the whole world is getting to know who you are. I told him at the end of that meeting that I would be in his service for as long as it took.
And Harry will invite Martin Luther King in his show Tonight with Belafonte, and it's really going to help Martin Luther King and the cause for the civil rights movement in America. Harry will be vitally important for the Washington March in 1963 because he will bring with him lots of actors from Hollywood during that march, and it's really going to bring lots of impact for the march. But obviously, even if Harry was someone extremely influential, not everyone was a fan of him. In the south of America, there was still lots of hatred towards him, and the fact that a Black man was being seen on national TV with lots of influence. And he explained that he had to do psychoanalysis to heal from all of that hatred that he received. But despite of all the hatred that he received, he remained someone extremely influential. And to give you an example of how influential he was, Frank Sinatra asked him to perform as well as Ella Fitzgerald and Mahalia Jackson during the inaugural gala for John Fitzgerald Kennedy in 1961. And just like Frank Sinatra, he also spot the light on different artists like Bob Dylan, Nana Mouskouri, but also Miriam Makeba. And to tell you the little story of how he met Miriam Makeba, at this time, it was quite recently after her performance in Italy. And when she performed in Italy, when she tried to go back in South Africa, her visa has been cancelled. And she was at the time in exile because she was an open support anti-apartheid. And what happened is that she was in London, and he's going to tell her, go with me in America. He found 5 musicians for her, invited the press, and that's how the world of music in America discovered Miriam Makeba.
En Angleterre, il y a eu une visite de Harry Belafonte. Il a été très ému par le film. Et j'ai réussi à avoir un visa pour aller aux États-Unis. Je lui ai écrit, je lui ai télégraphié, téléphoné pour dire que j'arrive. Et il a mis beaucoup de gens qui m'attendaient pour my arrival in New York. Et il y avait Lionel Rogosin qui avait fait le film aussi, qui était intéressé. Et je suis arrivée, j'ai resté. Il m'a dit, bon, qu'est-ce qu'on va faire? J'ai dit, je n'ai pas de musique ni rien, pas de musicien. Il a arrangé pour avoir 3 musiciens pour moi. Et il a mis un arrangeur avec moi qui j'ai chanté tout ce que je connais, le monsieur noté, oui, pour que les musiciens puissent avoir les accords et tout. Et j'ai répété avec les musiciens 2 jours. 3e jour, je suis allée en Californie où j'ai fait le show de Steve Allen. J'ai chanté une seule chanson pendant 3 minutes. Et ça m'a lancé dans tous les États-Unis.
Harry was also someone really committed for Africa, and he tried to push as many African artists as he possibly could. And in 2004, Harry traveled all the way to Kenya to stress the importance of education for children in the region. In 2002, Africa rewarding him for his commitment in Africa with the Bishop John T. Walker Distinguished Humanitarian Service Award. There is an image that I find absolutely beautiful. It is when Harry goes back to Jamaica with his family and he's showing to his family where he used to live as a kid. And what you see is a man who managed to heal from all of the pain, the question that he had.
84 years young. Sounds like life is pretty good for Harry Belafonte.
Well, if it could be much better, I'd be hard-pressed to define what that could be.
And when I was mentioning Paul Robeson, when Harry went to visit Paul Robeson at the end of his life, he asked him,
I said to him, Paul, you've been through an awful lot, and you've made some significant sacrifices. When you look back at all of it now, do you think the journey was worth it for the price you've paid? He said, Harry, let me tell you that there's just no question in my mind that even with the many victories we've not achieved, along with all the victories we achieved, one way or the other, the real essence of all of this and the essence of life was, in fact, or is, in fact, the journey itself. The experiences, the men, the women, the children I've met on the way, the things that I've heard, the lives that I've touched and have been touched by, and I've been touched by, would have made me do this all over again and maybe even do it better. There's only one thing I wish I knew then that I know now that might have made it a little better for me. And I said, well, what was that? And he said, I wish I'd really understood how true it is that in the final analysis, every generation will have to be responsible for itself.
And when you see all the achievements that Harry left behind him, there is a long list of awards for Harry, including 2 Grammy Awards and the Life Achievement Award, 6 Golden Records, an Emmy Award, as well as a Tony Award for his performance in the musical Almanac, the Kennedy Center Honor in 1989, the National Medal of Art in 1994, the BET Humanitarian Award in 2006, and he also served as an advisory council for the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation. He left something exceptional and that he can be very proud from heaven to see the impact that he had on the world. So I'm pleased to have shared the story of a pioneer who opened the door for so many artists, not only in the music industry, but in this world of entertainment, in a time when civil rights were still a question in America. I hope that his story inspired you and that you would see how Harry Belafonte has been someone absolutely exceptional and left a huge legacy behind him. I'll see you all next week.
The arts has captured who we are. and has reflected our history in a very impressive and meaningful